Hi, I'm Mr. Miyagi and this is Mr. Miyagi's Workshop. Well, we're going to do another little vid on XS650s. What are we going to do this time? Well, let's say you want to go full mod and remove the starter totally, completely out of the system. Well, that's great, you can. But where this goes through, that leaves a big hole. So what are we going to do about that? Well, let's find out. Okay, what you'll have to do is, on this project, is you're going to have to remove the starter. Before you do any of that, disconnect your negative on your battery so the system is down. Drain your oil. Otherwise, the oil is going to come gushing out of this hole when you pull this starter out. Make sure your system is drained. Just want to know that. So we're pulling the starter. 4 bolts around here we take off, and we're taking off the starter cable itself, which goes to the solenoid, located right on here. You take that off, you're going to be pulling the solenoid and everything out anyway. Next stage you want to do is you want to remove this cover. So once the bolts are out, this should walk off. You may end up having to tap it a little bit, but try not to bung up this gasket here. Now you're going to have a starter cluster on here. What happens is that when your starter is inserted, that's where it runs. So that actually turns that portion of the gear. The other portion of the gear turns this one up in here, which runs the other side, which turns the engine over. There's a little Bendix mechanism on the other side you have to deal with. Okay, so you can either leave this in place or remove it. But the next stage of the game is that you're going to have to remove this seal that is mounted in here on this, where the starter went through. Now, I ended up with a piece of tubing that was roughly that size. Let me measure it so everybody knows what I'm talking about. This is a piece of Schedule 40 1.25" pipe, and I just put that in there, used a hammer, drove it out. Now the next stage you need to do, you need to go to the hardware store, or most likely the auto parts store. And what you're looking for is a freeze plug. Now, I know they sell kits out there that clamp, but they're expensive. These are only a couple bucks. This is a 1 13/16 outside. And then at this stage, once this is all out, you can put in your freeze plug. Now, here again, this is a 1 13/16 freeze plug. That would just go up in there. Driven in place. Now, you definitely want to put sealant around her. I'm going to rebuild this motor, so I don't need the sealant. But I would put some, what I have here is some high temp gasket, and that's usually what I use. And then maybe place a little bit around here, checking your gasket on here. Hopefully you didn't tear it when you were taking it off, and then you can just reseal that area again. And that time too, if there's any crud or anything, you can clean this all out, because what ends up happening sometimes, the dirty oil will sit down in here, because you don't ever get that totally drained out of there. I know people say, oh yeah, you do. You don't. But anyway, with the plug in place and stuff, then you can go ahead and put your starter gear plate back on with the sealant on there. And that just pops in there. Your screws back in, tighten it down, and you're good to go. So I hope this helps deleting the starter. Once again, I want to say if you're going to go back to a starter one of these days, it's just much easier just to leave it in the engine. You're not, unless you're worried about weight, which this thing doesn't hardly weigh anything. But that way you'll never lose it. You know where it's at all the time. It's not going to affect anything on the engine because it can't turn the Bendix shaft that goes all the way through the engine, which stays in place. So it's a piece of cake just to leave it in there, or you can package it up but save it. You never know. And then on these freeze plugs, like I said, once again, it's an 1 13/16 freeze plug that you can put inside there. I think that, what is that, 46 millimeters or something like that. But this is an easy fix. You can spend a fair amount of money on those deleting plugs that they put in, which are kind of nice, I guess. But when you can go to the auto parts store and get this, you know, the little plug, makes a lot more sense, especially when it costs $2 compared to what, 20, 30 bucks for one of those delete ones. And of course, sealant, which you're always going to need anyway, so what the heck. That's just a simple process there. It's nothing exciting. Piece of Schedule 40 1.25" pipe, or a wood dowel. Fairly larger wood dowel would work better for, especially for taking this out. You may end up having to if you have a flat punch, you can knock these out, but I prefer to use something that's close to the same size as the seal. Plus, it works really well for putting these in. I mean, it fits that freeze plug just fine. So, anyway, I hope that's helped. And as always, if there's any questions or comments, you can put them in the comment section below, or you can send them to my email address at tmiyagi@hotmail.com. And if you've liked this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget that ringy-dingy button for the next episode coming up. So this is Mr. Miyagi saying be safe out there, and hope to see you on the road. Ciao.